London Real, sponsored by Bulletproof Coffee.
Where do we go from here? I mean, I talk to people I know in the States, and they have this kind of a shrug thing that with the information. It was a big shock. It was a shock to me. I mean, I was like, Jesus, every Gmail I'm typing, but a lot of them are just like, yeah, there's not much we can do about it, and they've kind of rolled on. What do you think we go from here? We've got all this new information. How do we behave different? Or what do we do different as citizens?
Got to be smarter. We have to be.
Okay.
Get teched up and protect ourselves, because we can't guarantee our governments are going to protect our privacy. And, the right to privacy was put in place in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, straight after the Second World War, to stop the abuses of Nazism, to stop the abuses of totalitarianism. And we seem to forget and think that human rights are a luxury. They're not. They're fundamental, and privacy is one of them. And the reason they're so important now is, many people say, I've done nothing wrong, I've got nothing to hide. Yeah. But that's bogus, because we know from the lessons of history that what you're doing today might still be legal, but tomorrow they might change the laws and it's not. Right. So suddenly you might be out there waving a placard as a part of an Occupy protest or environment protest, thinking I'm exercising my democratic rights. Then they change the law. Suddenly you're defined as a domestic extremist or terrorist, and we all know how terrorists can be treated now. You don't have any rights. So the goalposts can be shifted very easily. We saw how that worked in the run-up to Nazi Germany in the 1930s. The journalists, the trade unionists, the communists, the Jews, and so it went on. And that can happen in any country. And I have to say, looking at the shredding of all our civil liberties in both the US and the UK since 9/11, what we're looking at now is a de facto police state. All the laws are in place, they're just not being applied to most citizens yet. So I think it's not a case of having anything to hide, it's having a case that I have a right to privacy, and I can't guarantee my government will uphold that right, therefore I need to take the steps to do it. Because if I don't have privacy, I can't freely read or watch information on the internet without them knowing what I'm reading or watching. I can't freely say what I think to my contacts without them listening. And I can't, I just don't have the freedom of thought, therefore, to put together new ideas. So I begin to self-censor. And then once you start self-censoring because you're frightened of what the authorities are picking up, how does the argument you've got nothing to hide still work?
Right, then it is a police state.
It is,
and then you are, and then Big Brother's watching, and your life is completely controlled by your own paranoia or by your own fear.
Yeah, exactly. So, in order to have freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, all those basic rights that we spent hundreds of years fighting for in the Western world, in Europe, we need free media. And I don't mean, the Daily Mail or the BBC. I mean, the internet as our free media. That's what we need. It's fundamental.
I was trying to explain this concept to someone in the States, and they're like, I have nothing to hide, that usual story. And I was like, all right, well, they're going to record everything you've done, say, for the next 15, 20 years. And say at some point you become an activist, or say you run for political office, and someone doesn't like you who has the NSA connections. They don't even have to go public about that email you sent, or about that affair you had, or about that website you went on. All they have to do is send you a private message and say, look, we have this information, we can make it public, or you can just shut up, get out of the race, go do your separate ways.
Absolutely.
And that's a lot of power.
Yeah. Or you might be an activist when you're younger, and then, further down the line, you've grown up and you're in a nice corporate job and all the rest of it. And suddenly that group becomes deemed to be a terrorist group or something. And then, oh my God, you were a member of a terrorist group when you were younger. So, these things can follow you. And if that sounds fanciful, look how they treated the Occupy movement, both in the City of London, where a leaked police document was given to Occupy, showing that they were being deemed to be a domestic extremist or terrorist group. And this was a letter that the police sent out to all the banks in the area. So Occupy could have been arrested under the terrorist legislation if they chose to. And again, in New York, we saw the same thing, where suddenly CCTV cameras were everywhere and monitoring their every move, and all their information was scooped up. So just because you're out there protesting the banks doesn't mean, you can't be black-bagged, potentially.
Yeah, and I walked around and saw all those protests, and there wasn't really anything extremist or violent going on there. It was literally an Occupy movement, and it seemed to be a shift, a mindset are trying to demonstrate.
Yeah,
it's tough. I find like people are so busy in their lives, and there's so much on their mind. Like me talking, about my own life, and so I think that way often. I'm just like, I got nothing to hide right now, and it's quite encompassing on a person's life to take the steps to make sure that no one's watching. And
actually, it's not that difficult.
So I have to go to one of these crypto
parties.
It
would be the simplest way to do it.
Yeah.
And once you've got it set up, then it'll just run. So it won't impede your life at all.
So it's fine.
Yeah, it's just taking that first step, having the awareness that there are requirements to do this, understanding the importance of privacy, and then doing it, and then live as you would before.
And that's it.
Yeah.
It's like any human right. When you have it for so long, I think you
Right.
forget it.
Yes.
And then you don't realize that it's a crucial part of living in a free world.
Right. And it's something that you only realize when it comes to bite you, right? Because I think if you just kept going and for the next 50 years and I never went in politics or big CEO job or anything like that, then maybe nothing would happen. Do you know what I mean?
If you're lucky, but if the
you-
fascists were in
no,
power, who's to
well,
say?
exactly. I know, but it's something that, today's actions, the reaction doesn't happen today. It happens down the road. And I think people often put those in the back of their mind.
Well,
right?
let me explain what it's like to live with no privacy, because I have.
Yeah.
After the whistleblowing years, and we went on the run around Europe and then lived in exile in Paris for 2 years. And during those years, it was a huge story, exposing the crimes of MI6 and MI5. And David Shaler, my former partner, was in the newspapers all the time. I mean, it was a story that ran and ran. And we knew we were being watched. So we had a flat where we couldn't assume that the rooms in our flat weren't bugged, including our bedroom, where we couldn't assume that our communications were not intercepted. In fact, we knew they were, because sometimes they played up and we caught them out. So you can't even have a word with your mother, for example, who's upset about something, because everything is being recorded.
Right.
and this is late 90s. This isn't
Yeah,
like
Yeah, this is late
communism
90s, yeah.
70s. This is fairly recent.
Yeah. So, I would have, if something happened with the family, I'd have to spend hours running around the locality with telephone cards in order to find different public phone boxes so I could just speak to my mother with privacy. That's assuming that her phone wasn't bugged as well. So there's that. And then there's also the sense that your friends can be reporting back on you. So, for example, we know a couple were turned. They were forced to report back on us because they were caught out doing stuff, minor stuff. So it's this sort of awareness that you have no privacy at all is very corrosive to the human spirit. And sure, we were in an unusual position then. We'd blown the whistle and we'd taken on the authorities knowing what to expect. But this is the position that we're all in now, whether we're doing anything wrong or not. So it's just that corrosiveness of it, I think, is until you have experienced it, you don't realise quite how bad it is.
This week on London Real, best-selling author and Pulitzer Prize winner Jared Diamond.
Why on earth did you and your dopey society invent metal and we didn't? Instead he asked, why is it that you white people have all the cargo and we black people don't? They're all people. They're all dealing with the same universal human problems that you and I deal with. That question, why the difference in technology, was in the back of my mind and led to my book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. Historians didn't discuss the question because it was too big a question.
It's a matter of life or death for us to understand why these past societies succeeded or failed.
On Sunday, London Real presents Jared Diamond, Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Once you've been to New Guinea, the rest of the world is boring.